Welcome to Friends with Fertility, the podcast where we dive deep into the world of fertility, reproductive health, and all the emotional journeys that are in between. I'm your host, Elizabeth King, a fertility expert dedicated to providing you with the knowledge, support, and inspiration you need on your path to parenthood. Whether you're just starting out, exploring your options, or looking for solidarity and advice, we are here for you. Let's embark on this journey together and turn uncertainty into empowerment and make friends with fertility. Let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome back to Friends with Fertility. Today we have Beth Gulotta. Am I saying your name right, Beth?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
Okay, great. And she is somebody who it works in the mental health space, which all of you know I am deeply drawn to in so many ways and for so many reasons. So I'm really excited to speak with you today. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
How did you get into fertility? What drew you into this world?
Honestly, my own journey drew me into this world. I am a mental health counselor. I have a group practice in Manhattan, um, and sort of my personal life has shaped my professional life. And so I could back up. I think my first kind of experience was with fertility was freezing my eggs at 37. Um, And I froze my eggs at 37 because of a lot of what I talk about on my podcast, Quiet the Clock, is that my timeline wasn't lining up with how we're told things are supposed to line up. So I partnered at 34. And at 37, we weren't quite aligned with timeline for children. And I wanted to preserve my fertility options. So I went and froze my eggs at 37. Um, which we can totally get into that because that is a lot. And I know you have experience with that as well. And then
Mhm.
really where I got into the thick of it was where I'm now, which is in the secondary infertility journey. Um,
Okay.
and why I started the podcast was not just fertility, but it was kind of overall societal pressure and timeline pressure that so many women were feeling, myself included. A lot of the female clients
Mhm.
coming to me and that I was working with in my practice were feeling that. I'm just like, so many of us are not hitting these milestones when we thought we should or were told we should. And we're all feeling the emotional heaviness of that. So really it really started more around timelines and still is a lot around like timeline pressure, kind of authentic self, owning your own path and journey, not getting stuck in comparison. But a lot of what comes up for women, especially women in their later 30s and 40s, is fertility, is the biological clock.
Yeah.
um
Yeah, I love the title of your podcast, Quiet the Clock. I mean, that's what a great title. It's awesome.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think it resonates with a lot of people. I think we all feel, whether we like it or not, or whether we've done a lot of work to kind of quiet the clock, we still are susceptible to it, myself included. So yeah, I think to answer your question, my life experience kind of just guided me there. And what I've experienced in secondary infertility is in a lot of ways criminal, in terms of
Hmm.
just the information that's out
Tell
there, the
me
lack
about
of
that. What do you mean?
um I was on a call earlier, a personal like call with someone who's really well known in this field, just kind of talk through where I'm at in my journey. And I think there's a lot we still don't know, that we aren't told, that where we're misled. I think there are things that should be happening before you ever do a transfer that are not happening. I feel like Western medicine, my experience, is reactive, not proactive. I also think it's very sort of limited in scope and perspective. I've sought a lot of resources outside of my fertility doctor in terms of like functional medicine, acupuncture, other doctors that are
Right.
willing to look a little more outside the box. So
Right.
I, I just think I think we're being really misled. I think we're not giving all the been giving all the options. We're not being given all the information. I mean, I have been through essentially 6 losses, 2 failed transfers,
Mm.
4 miscarriages, and I literally
So
was
sorry.
just told what a hysteroscopy is, what it means to have scar tissue, especially after a woman that has had a C-section. Literally now is when I'm being told about that. And I just don't
Mhm.
think that's right. I don't think I had high antibodies, thyroid antibodies after my first miscarriage. My fertility doctor told me not to worry about that. I didn't take that. Luckily, like, I don't take those things for hard fact truth, but some women do, and that's where I will say it's criminal. Like,
Right.
if you're not resourced enough or diligent enough to kind of, like, find other resources or just question what your doctor's saying and kind of look elsewhere, you can be misled for a really long time, and women do, like, multiple retrievals, multiple transfers, and then only then seek other resources.
For sure. I mean, I agree with you 1,000%. And I think people that are you've been in this for a little bit now, there's also some expectation that you know you know what to do next, right? You know the expectation of that. And some people do and some people don't, because at the same time everybody's story is different. Everybody's
Mhm.
situation is different. And I do think that that's where having a fertility coach helps in that way, because they can help guide you to say, "Hey, you should be aware of asking your doctor X, Y, and Z. No, they shouldn't be telling you this. Go see this guy instead," or whatever it is. But
Yeah.
to your point, people who are left on their own and or don't have the resources to do that can be led down a path that, unfortunately, to your point of quiet in the clock, we don't have the time to be going
Oh my
around in
god.
circles around these things and to be told, whatever. I'm thinking of one of story for myself was after one of my miscarriages, and I knew that something wasn't right. And the doctor was like, "No, everything's fine." I'm like, "This is not normal." My bleeding was just, it looked like there was a murder in the bed basically every day.
Oh.
And this was still 3, 4 weeks after the fact. And I was like, and I was taking all the medication to stop the bleeding. Something wasn't right. And I would
Mm.
go back. He's like, "No, it's fine. Your HCG levels are down." I'm like, "But it's so finally I went to another doctor. And as you know, when you're with a fertility clinic, you have such a relationship with them. And I still to this day love him
Mhm.
so much, but I knew something was off. And turns out there was still fetal tissue left in my uterus that was causing the bleeding. And so just something simple like that, to your point of like, then can cause the scar tissue that then can cause another situation that then, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And when I think at that point I was 42 or 43, like, I didn't have time to be being told over and over that it was normal when it wasn't normal, and I gotta get back on this situation fast, because time is not on my side.
Right.
So, I totally hear you in so many different angles of that, and I can empathize and sympathize with you and lots of people that are listening in this, because, it may be my situation or something else where I feel like they just don't dig deep enough, whether it's because the clinics are too busy or whatever it may be. They just don't spend the time to be with you to really find out what's the underlying issue of what's causing this.
I'm also curious now. I wanna be careful how I say this. I'm also curious to know how much they actually know. I think
Yeah.
there's a deficit in sort of education and training when it comes to other things besides what they know. I just think I don't think my fertility doctor knows anything about thyroid. I don't think my fertility doctor knows anything about nutrition and lifestyle and supplementation. I just don't think that was
Mhm.
her training. And even in my work as as a therapist, it's sort of my ethical obligation to say, well, that's outside my scope, but try
Right.
this, right? If someone wants EMDR,
Right.
I'm not trained in EMDR, so I'm like, go to an EMDR specialist. And and it's not to pigeonhole every fertility doctor. It's been my experience that I don't think the training was there on those types of things. And it's really hard because while we're in this and carrying the grief and the heartache, we're also carrying the burden of being our own detectives, of being our own advocates, having to
100%.
push so hard, having to research, having like it's so much work, it's so consuming, and that's not even the grief. You don't even have time to grieve. You don't have time to grieve because you're like,
Right.
what's the next step? I literally had my last failed transfer February 3rd, February 4th. I'm in bed researching, filling out all the paperwork for other consultation and doctors, and it's like
Mhm.
and maybe that's where, like, to your point, I can't wait to have you on my podcast because I wanna learn more about the fertility coaching, is just having someone in your corner to help advocate, to give you the information. And I remember after my first miscarriage, I just inundated myself with information and books and research and all of these things. And I remember my partner Rob turning to me, he's like, "You have to stop. This is too much." I'm like, And I'm in tears. I'm like, "No, you don't understand. Like, I need the information to ask the questions." I didn't even know my first transfer, I didn't even have enough information to know what questions to ask. And that's the
Right.
part that's also criminal is like we are so as women in our own fertility health and our hormone health, like we're so miseducated. It's like we sit in these doctors' offices. Like my first transfer, I didn't my THS was 2.94. What I know now, I never would have done that transfer, but they're like, "It's fine, it's fine,
Mhm.
it's fine." I didn't know it wasn't
Mhm.
fine. I'm blindly
Yeah.
trusting you that you're telling me that this is fine, and it wasn't.
Right. That's thyroid and vitamin D are the first things I tell my patients as soon as we meet. Find out what those are because if you don't have those at good levels, you shouldn't be going anywhere else except for figuring out how to get those where they need to be first and foremost. And then we work backwards, but those are like number 1 and 2 of for
Mm.
fertility. So I'm
Yeah, no
sorry
one
you've
told
had
me
that
that.
experience on top of the losses is it's extremely frustrating. And, somebody I was on a radio show yesterday and they said, "What do you think the biggest cause of miscarriage loss is?" And that's such I wish we knew, right? We don't know. If we did know, we wouldn't be at a place where 1 in 4 go through it. And it's so all over the board. But I was also saying at that point is that I really don't feel that the doctors dig into that deep enough, right? It
Oh.
shouldn't just be, "Oh, it's your age. Oh, it's whatever." And especially if you're using younger eggs, right? Th I we could get into a whole lot of things because I feel like they use the age egg thing as like a blanket statement all the time. And somebody who's had my children over 41 with my own eggs, I feel like,
That is just
no,
the
that's
I
not
can't
the
wait to
case,
have you
you
on and
know?
talk about that. Like, that is the most I can't wait to hear more about your story. Like, that is the most reassuring thing, and that totally invalidates what's out there, these narratives of, like, 35 being the cliff or that you can't do
I
anything to
feel like
change
it's
your egg quality.
offensive, really, because it's
Yeah.
like you're not doing any insight into me. You're just giving me a blanket statement that it's my eggs because of my age without looking into anything else about me,
Y
right?
yeah, I mean, I
It's like, give
I
me
got
a different answer that's educated.
well, the answer I got from my fertility doctor that I've been with, and to your point, like what you said about your doctor, that I really have liked. I really, really have liked her, and she's definitely someone that takes time to sit with me and answer questions. But we're kind of at this point where, like, the only feedback she's giving me is this is IVF and this happens. I have had 3 PGT tested embryos, 2 not implant, 1 miscarriage. And I'm like, and then I've also had a natural pregnancy and 2 IUI pregnancies. I was like, so you can't just say it's an embryo issue with
Mm,
that because I've tried tested embryos. So there's like, you can't just give me, this is IVF. And that can't be a good enough answer anymore.
mhm. And to your point earlier about feeling like they just aren't educated, I agree. I think the best fertility doctors or reproductive endocrinologists are saying, "Do you have a fertility team set up? And if you don't, here's the acupuncturist, here's the naturopath and the functional that I recommend that we work with as your team to get you pregnant."
Yeah.
Because the fertility doctors, their study primarily is my statistics are good if I can get a healthy egg and a healthy sperm in dishes, put them together, and then implant, and we're out for the running. But what if that doesn't happen, right? Then what, right? What are you going to tell me then? And that's where I feel like sometimes they get a little bit tripped up in a way because they aren't educated in the overall health of the body, right?
Right. Yeah.
Necessarily. Some are and some aren't. I would say that the newer generation of doctors that I'm seeing coming in are much more aware, and if they're not, to your point, they pass you off to somebody else. But it's really interesting because I think that even to the point of supplements, I remember asking my doctor, "Which supplements should I take?" And he was like, "Doesn't really matter," you know? Um, and now doing what I do every day and having people all over the world ask me, not only does it matter, but it matters at what stage you're at too, right? Like, are you doing a retrieval? Are you doing a transfer? Is your lining not
Mhm.
coming up?
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of different reasons for different things. So I think if anything that people walk away from this portion of the conversation is get some sort of fertility team that you feel supported on different angles to feel like you're having that education so that you can go back to your RE to say, what about this, or this, or whatever, and ask them to do you're paying a lot of money in most cases to have them do this. And you should be having them dig into your situation a little bit more.
Yeah, that would be my huge I mean, that would be I'm happy to hear that some of these newer doctors are kind of more whole picture. But that would be my biggest recommendation to women is, understanding if they are willing to like think outside the box, understanding if they're willing to look at you more holistically, like individually, like a person-centered. That's how I practice therapy. It's a person-centered perspective. It's not like one size fits all. Um, yeah, and getting that team in place is so hugely important. Because what's difficult too is that even when you come with the knowledge and the resource, the doctors are gonna push back on you. I mean, I've asked things of my doctor, like an HSG, and she said, "No, you don't need that." I went to another doctor, had it done, and I had a blockage in my tube. So, even with the knowledge and the research, they're gonna push back on some of these different ideas because they don't know them, so they don't believe in them, and so yeah, you have to really push, and if usually, like, you'll feel it in your gut too, like you did with unfortunately, I'm so sorry about your loss, but you kind of and you gotta listen to that intuition even when a doctor is telling you it's not right, because we do know, like, this is not right. I know now, like, this is IVF is not something else is wrong with my body. Something
Mhm.
else is happening that is not supporting these embryos. So yeah, just being willing to not take those sort of blanket answers, don't just take those to be full truth.
For sure. And to your point about if you want to have tests run and your doctor's saying no, go to somebody else that will run them. My opinion is let's get the lay of the land. Let's do all the tests so we can eliminate that. At least we know where we're starting from, right? If we can say all those checked off and you're good, great. Okay, then what? But like in your case, at least you know now. I've had clients come to me trying for 3 years or more, only to find out that their tubes are blocked or their partner has no sperm or something. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, why this should have
That's what I
happened
mean. That's criminal. And if
from
we're
the
talking about
jump."
time,
Yeah,
think about how much time you lose.
I know.
You lose so like if I after my first miscarriage, I did seek out a reproductive immunologist who told me, "Come back, you're fine, don't worry about anything, come back to me after another miscarriage." That was over a year ago. If he had done a workup on me, that's where I'm at now. We're doing an immunological workup with a completely different doctor because mine won't do it. Like, maybe we would have found something a year ago. Maybe I wouldn't have lost another embryo. Maybe I wouldn't have had 3, it's like there's just
Right.
so much more to be done before you send women down these paths because it's so heartbreaking.
I know. It's awful to say, but oftentimes I tell my patients, tell them you've been trying for over a year, or over 6 months, or tell them that you've had more additional miscarriages just so that you will be accepted to get these tests done. Because I really don't think that you should have to wait because of the time and so I mean it's a difficult it's not an easy path, especially with the immunology. There's not a lot of doctors that specialize in that, and I
Or we'll
think
do it, yeah.
they've had a big influx in the last 5 years of people realizing, "Okay, I need this. I need to get these answers, and hopefully everything's all clear," but at least that's a whole other path to go down to find out, and I think that because it's such a rare specialty that a lot of those doctors are kind of pushing off people because they don't have the time or the resources to take everyone on.
Yeah, I met with a doctor, about a week ago or so, and he used to do in New York City, and he used to do the reproductive immunology, and he doesn't do it anymore. And so yeah, it's difficult to
Mm.
find someone that will do it. Um, but I think if you're at this stage in it and there's still no answers, it's definitely something worth exploring. And I hope that we're headed in a direction where there's more integration to both worlds that are kind of working with fertility. What I have found so far with my journey is like we're speaking two different languages, and it's so difficult for patients. It's so confusing. It's again heartbreaking. But I hope we're moving in a way where there's more integration. I hope we're moving in a direction where we're more proactive and not reactive. Even after my first miscarriage, my doctor was like, "Well, we'll do a multiple miscarriage workup on you. We're not there yet, but we'll do it." I'm like, "Why don't you just do it after one? Why don't you do it before?" Like, what? Like, how many miscarriages do women have to
Mhm.
have before we're looking at anything more in depth?
And I think they have been moving that number back for the recurrent loss panel because that was problem, right? I think initially it was 4 and then it went to 3. I think it might be 2 now, but to your point, like, why do we have to get to 3 or 4 before you're trying to find out what the reason is? Yeah, it's frustrating.
I think what's again, I don't wanna, like, generalize too much or, like, blanket statement, but I think what is and of course, this is my field, I think what is completely lost in a lot of this is the mental health component, the emotional component, the sort of sensitivity to women, like, to just think, like, "Okay, after your 3rd miscarriage, we'll go through that." Do you even know what it's like to, like do doctors even know what it's like to go through 1? Like,
Yeah.
why would we wait? Why wouldn't we want to prevent women from going through multiple it's so traumatizing.
Yeah, for sure. I went to a specialty therapist after my first miscarriage because I was devastated, and I hadn't been to therapy in a long time, and I remember walking out the door to my husband who was waiting for me, and I was more hysterical going out than I was going in because I just wanted that hope from her to be like, "It's gonna be okay. I had a miscarriage. You'll get through this. I have kids now," or whatever. And I remember thinking there was such a disconnect from what I needed at that time from everyone that was in this the medical side of things, right? So
Mhm,
my
mhm.
doctor referred me to this person. My doctor, of course, walked me out the back door and they were like, it's not your fault. And I get it. They're not trained in doing all of this. And I had to ask for the resource of I need to talk to somebody because I don't know how to function right now. And I've also been in mental health for 15 years already, right? So God forbid somebody who hasn't and doesn't know the tools to be doing
Mhm,
things in this way.
mhm.
So, yeah, I do again see a big change in these younger doctors that are coming in that really do
Amazing.
see the value of the because when people are regulated and when people are supported, they have better results. Their success rates are higher too. So there is, I think, a new revelation or revolution, so to
Yeah.
speak, of doctors that are understanding there's a bigger picture here.
Yeah, and just to yeah, to your point, to feel supported, to for me going to this new doctor that I'm gonna be working with, like, to have him explain things to me, for him to have a plan, for him to have hope. He said, "I'll get you pregnant." He's like, "Get out of here. I'll get you pregnant." Even that, because I definitely lost hope through this journey, and so there's sort of this revival of some hope for me that at least there is a plan, like, at least he has confidence in kind of where I'm at and where he can get me to. And so I think that's hugely important to feel like you have that support. And
Absolutely.
yeah, it's really huge. I've seen a real shift in me, even in sort of my
Mhm.
impatience. And that's something, again, if we're talking about like timelines and timeline pressure, um, when we want these things, we want them now, and no one wants to be on
Of
this
course.
journey, but you do, and you do the mental math of like, okay, if it doesn't happen this month, and then this is how long I have to wait, and this will be my due date. And for me, as going through secondary
Yeah.
infertility, I'm like, this is my age gap with my kids. And so,
Yeah.
you really there's a lot of lost time potentially, and that's really hard to do, and so, like, the impatience for me has not served me well because I'm watching the time pass, and I want this to happen now, and
Of course.
kinda having had this consult with him and this plan with him, I don't feel that as much anymore. I don't feel the pressure of the
Good.
time, and I'm kind of like, "Okay, we're gonna do this in March, and if that all looks good, we're gonna do this in April," and I'm feeling, yeah, more relaxed in that.
Awesome. That's great. I'm actually doing a PhD, and part of what we talk about is whoever's in the white coat, their attitude towards it makes all the difference. And that's exactly what you're just saying and exactly what we're talking about and studying. So it's
Oh,
good to
that's
hear
so cool.
that in turn came up for you because it's so true and it makes such a huge difference. So I'm happy to hear that. And the fact that you and I are talking, I hope that I can just my being here and saying, don't give up your age. I know that the age thing is something that a 30-year-old can't understand, and it is an added layer of stress that unless
Yeah.
you're going through it and you have that on you, whether you have another child or not. I had my first one at 41, but I going through it with my second, it was stressful. And even if the one child doesn't discount your wanting and yearning to build your family for another,
No,
regardless
no.
of what's happening. And so that also is pretty frustrating, I feel like, because, it's almost the mentality of like, don't worry, you have one. And it's like, you're totally missing the point. It's not about the one. I love my one, but I want a family. There's more to it that needs to come. So,
Yeah, and honoring everyone's vision, and I think, the fertility space is really difficult to navigate on so many levels. I think it's so nuanced, like, of course, everyone's at different stages of it. There are women going through it that don't have any children and might look at me having one child and
yeah,
being like, "Well, you already have one." And I could look at someone that
right,
has 2 and wants 3, and I'll be like, but you already have 2 because they have the vision I want." But I've been thinking
right,
about that a
right.
lot lately is like honoring everyone's vision. The heartbreak is just as real if you
Mm,
want 3, if that's your vision for your
right,
family. So as
right.
whether it's 2 or 1. So it's hard. You can get really
100%.
it's tricky. You can get caught in, like, comparison and all of these things, and that makes us we're human. But, yeah, it's really honoring everyone's own vision for their family.
Yeah, and I think having that hope and that desire over the fear keeps you going, and as long as you can keep people around you that flame that fire of the hope and the desire and keep you going, keeps you on that path of knowing I can do this, even though you may be getting a lot of bad news. And it's hard because your
Yeah.
experience in this, you start to be like, oh God, something else or another loss or the transfer didn't work or whatever. And it's like, oh, how do you keep
Mhm.
going in a situation where it feels like everything's pointing to you to say, just stop it, But there has to be something in you or somebody around you that's saying, no, hold on to this. You'll be there. You'll get there.
Yeah.
So
It's
don't
difficult.
give
I
up
mean,
hope.
it's not easy. It's definitely not easy to hold on to hope, especially when there is so much loss. It's like I've been saying this to my partner, like, for me, it's like a loss happens and I, like, immediately go in the hole. And then it takes all the energy to get back out of the hole, and then you get some
Mhm,
consistency of, like, feeling good, regaining some hope, regaining some confidence, regaining some sense of self, and then you get hit with another loss. So for me, I feel like, I've been in this about a year and a half maybe, and so the losses have been pretty consecutive and consistent. So it's like
mhm.
it's just
Yeah,
trying to get your footing, and maybe sometimes, to your point, it's not just solely on you. Maybe helping to get your footing is having people around you to, like, be the hope and be the strength when you can't be it. But
yeah,
it's difficult. It's difficult to get your footing. And, for my journey too, and I imagine many other women, like, the bad news isn't just the miscarriages or the transfers. It's the blood work that doesn't come back right. It's the levels that don't
yeah,
look right. It's the answers that are go unanswered. So there's just so much sort of
yeah.
hard hurdles.
It could be an every other day situation of waiting for news, whether it's a portal or a phone call or whatever it may be. And that's
Oh,
where again we start to for me and my what I do with my clients is we start to open up this whole spiritual side of what else could be going on to be blocking
mhm.
this
Yes.
that maybe we're not looking at that's you know a little bit deeper. But that's a whole nother podcast. But
I know, but that's
what
such a huge component of it, like, huge, huge, huge. Yeah, I had this consultation with this doctor I'm gonna work with who talked about a hysteroscopy and scar tissue, especially after C-section, and the very next day, I did my first Reiki session, and she had said the same thing, that there
mm,
was so much dense energy around my womb, and she's like,
yeah.
"It was either scar tissue or trauma." I'm like, "Well, it's probably both."
Mhm.
But yeah, I think
Yeah.
that the spiritual component is so huge and important.
Yeah, and I have seen amazing things where it's that aha moment and it kind of like unlocks the key and makes sense. And I had to go through it myself with realizing all my losses were girls and I had boys and it it's a whole story, but I can explain that to you on another time. But there was something to that based on my
Mm.
mom's situation, what I grew up with, and everything. So yeah, there's always another layer to kind of look into, I think, when we're on this journey, and we
Yeah,
just
like,
have to
who is meant to be here? Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yes. Well, thank you for being here. Where can everyone find you?
Oh my gosh, you're so welcome. I love everything you're doing. I know I'll have you on my podcast, but I'd love to get connected even further. I think what you're doing is so wonderful and is so needed. Everyone can find me I'm on Instagram and TikTok at Quiet the Clock Pod. The podcast is Quiet the Clock. On YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever you can get your podcasts. And then my group practice is NYC Therapeutic Wellness. I'm currently not taking on any new clients, but I have wonderful, wonderful clinicians if anyone's looking for a therapist.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for what you're doing as well. And I can't wait to chat with you tomorrow.
Yeah, tomorrow. Exciting. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Friends with Fertility. We hope that you found the stories, insights, and tips as inspiring and informative as we did. Remember, you are not alone on this journey. Your friends with fertility are here for you. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. And don't forget to follow us on social media for updates and more fertility resources. Until next time, stay hopeful and keep believing in your journey, and know that we are sending you lots of love.